Hey everybody, welcome to Gaming Without Parole. Across the table from me is Bryan Paul.
And across the table from me is the ever-illustrious Mike Zeller.
It sure is. So this is episode 3 of our relaunch, episode 30-something or other.
30, I don't know. If I put them in order, that is.
Yeah,
Right?
oh, that's true.
Yeah, I have no idea.
So
Bear with us. The green screen, the numbering, the order of the episodes, the same clothes that you'll see us wear week after week.
Yeah, we kind of inadvertently have been matching a lot lately.
Not just red shirts.
Red Marvel shirts.
shirts.
Although mine is definitely, you can tell, is a Disney Marvel shirt.
Yeah.
Because it features no mention of the X-Men or the Fantastic Four.
I wonder how the Hulk's gonna look with the green screen.
Oh shit!
That'll be interesting.
They'll just look like somebody blew a hole through my stomach or
It
something.
might look like that. But again, we're not exactly the most professional podcast.
Yeah, I almost wore a Dark Souls t-shirt, but I was like, video game t-shirt, comic book t-shirt that's slightly less redundant.
It's like the guy who goes to the concert wearing the shirt.
The shirt,
band
yeah,
he's going to see.
yeah. There's just something kind of tacky about it, you know.
Yeah, it's like we know.
you like video games.
You don't need to advertise.
Really?
Anything. We definitely already know.
Yeah, I do love how Marvel has been trying to scrub all mention of the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. The X-Men being their most popular line.
These are the ones that Fox owns the rights to?
Fox owns the X-Men and Sony owns Fantastic Four.
Wow. What a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of planning ahead. Although in their defense, the way that their older movies were coming out, you couldn't really blame them for wanting to make a little bit of cash off the movie rights.
Sure. That's fair. Business. I hate when business gets in the way of our fun hobby.
Yeah.
And it happens quite a bit.
It does. Speaking of when business gets in the way of our hobby, actually that's not. This is totally unrelated. But we decided to talk about this week the PSP, which I brought it up as one
video game handheld of all time.
Yes, clearly, as when business gets in the way. The PSP was actually fairly successful in Japan. Yeah. I think it did okay over here too. It did. I mean, it was a distant second to Nintendo, but it did better than I think any other handheld other than the Nintendo one.
Well, and I'm sure we'll get into this eventually, but I don't think software sales were ever that great. I think when the PSP became known for its emulation power, I think that's when people were like, oh, I started buying 2 and 3 of them. You know, I feel like I always had 2 PSPs at any given time, and one was like hacked. Hacked to hell. Yeah.
I
shouldn't do this. The camera disappeared.
Yeah. I did notice. We mentioned last week that we're doing with a fantastic. We're doing the show with a fantastic green screen now. I don't actually know what's going to be behind us.
Yeah, it'll probably be pretty similar to last week.
Yeah. But it looked good. Although if you noticed when we kind of would like lean back a little bit or gesticulate, like we just vanished. Like, ooh, ghosts!
Watch my hand disappear.
Oh no, it's a haunted YouTube.
Yeah, you can't even imagine the space you need for proper green screening.
Yeah.
I feel like this covers a lot of room, but I need the room to be at least like 6 feet wider.
Yeah.
And we're doing our best with what we got.
Yeah, space, and I like Brian's apartment, but space would not be its primary selling point. I would say.
If I ever had a roommate, we'd have to.
It would just be impossible.
Yeah.
Or you would have to be fused together like some kind of Siamese twin. I'm sorry, conjoined twin.
Oh yeah, that's not politically
correct. It's not PC anymore.
So speaking of the PSP.
Speaking of the PSP, yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that you don't think software was the selling point, because when I first got my hands on a PSP, I thought to myself, what a piece of shit. I was not a big fan of.
When did you buy your PSP?
Pretty early on.
Yeah.
I bought one of the. I didn't buy it at launch, but shortly thereafter.
So I just looked it up. March 24th, 2005. That was the launch day. Yeah,
I probably bought it. I don't know. Within 6 months of that, shortly after, because I graduated from college in 2005. So shortly after graduation, I think.
I'll get to my purchasing story of it in just a minute.
Ooh.
But I'd like to know, when you played it and you said, what a piece of shit, Why did you buy it? Because at that point you must have had a chance to try it out and check out the games.
I bought it because of software. Yeah, that's.
You thought the system was a piece of shit. You thought the games were good.
I think that was eventually going to be my long-winded point. It's all right. You just cut right to the
shaved about 10 minutes off the cast.
You just took the bread off that sandwich, and we got the meat and the veggies right there. Time saver. I think the PSP had a fantastic library. Mechanically, as a system, I think it was junk. I didn't like its stupid little analog nub was worthless. It felt, at least the version that I had, and I've messed around with some of the updated versions, but the initial versions felt very cheap and brittle.
I mean, and
it was huge. Big. It was huge. I mean, you couldn't easily fit it in your pocket, but the killer was that stupid disk drive.
The UMD.
Yes, the UMD. I think Sony got a little bit drunk on their success with the PS3 and Blu-rays, or
at that point it was.
When did the PS3 come out? Actually,
yeah, it's an excellent question.
Was that beforehand? Because
when
it was
the PlayStation 3 come out.
that was.
This on the web for when did the PlayStation 3 come out? It was.
It came out in Japan, November 11th, 2006.
Oh wow! So it wasn't. No, I was wrong then. It's that makes it kind of miraculous that they pushed the Blu-ray player in the PS3 then, because
probably too late.
Their
at that point,
PSP was definitely them trying to promote this UMD format, which was awful. I mean, just awful. Those stupid little plastic cases just broke constantly. They were so cumbersome.
And for the first time ever, we were blessed with load times.
Yeah, on a handheld. Yeah.
Pretty stupid.
Yeah. It really, but it had such good software that I kept coming back to it.
Let me get my launch story out of the way.
Yeah, please.
I was living in Tennessee at the time. And
I'm sorry.
No, it was good. And I want to say that my favorite video game store there, used mostly, but they of course had their new stuff, was called Game Trader. And Game Trader was...
Okay. Is that a chain?
Yes. Yeah. It is, but that's... Now that you've said it, that's... Nope.
No.
Okay, because there were two. There was Game Crazy on one end of the city and Game Trader on the other end. And they might be... I know Game Crazy was definitely a chain.
Yeah.
Game Trader, maybe. But this one did not seem like one. You walked in, and the guy behind the counter, there was a guy very much like the comic book store guy.
Oh, yeah.
He knew everything about everything, and like
nice.
you could go in and just shoot the shit with him for like hours and not buy anything, which I did. Always felt guilty, but he was a nice guy. So we would always talk about the upcoming launch of the PSP and how it was going to blow the DS out of the water, and like he even showed me like before he was supposed to like the cases for the games, and I was like, these are adorable, they're so small. I was like, I just want this, and I pre-ordered one for launch day. Because he was convinced they were going to sell out by midday. Yep. So
optimism.
I went and got mine as soon as the store opened, and I was like, "Have they sold out yet?" And he's like, "No." He's like, strangely, it's like they're not really moving. But I brought it home and I showed it to Josh, my boyfriend at the time, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever!" Because forget about what the launch games were at the time. The screen was gigantic for the time.
Yeah.
And it was so big and bright, because up to that point we were dealing with like the DS screens, which were okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, the coolest screen I'd seen up to that point was like really the Game Boy Advance screen, and this was just so bright and vibrant by comparison. Yeah.
No, it definitely it looked nice right out of the box. Their launch titles were pretty good looking.
Yeah. We ended up after he saw it, he's like, I want this, and I was like, you have no money. So we actually went to his house, and we took his bass guitar, which he hadn't played in years, his amp, like all this stuff that had just been sitting in the corner of the room, and like it was actually at a point where his mom was like, are you sure you want to sell this? And he was like, yes. And she was like, are you sure you can get any money for this? And I said, I think we'll do what we can. And we ended up getting more than enough by pawning the guitar in the amp, and then he got his own PSP as well that day. And then we sat around with nothing to do.
Yeah. Although the decent stuff in their library kicked in pretty fast.
Well, hold on. Let's start with the let's start with some launch titles.
Ugh, I don't even think I bought any of those ever.
Remember when Ridge Racer used to be an important launch game for every Sony platform?
Barely even remember the words Ridge Racer.
Ridge
okay,
Racer.
Gotcha.
So PlayStation 1 launched with the original Ridge Racer. PlayStation 2 launched with or the Star Fox language.
Yeah.
So PlayStation 2 launched with Ridge Racer 5. PlayStation 3 launched with Ridge Racer 7. PSP launched with Ridge Racer. PSP. It was beautiful. It was amazing. I was like, this is a launch game, and it's unbelievable. It looked like PlayStation 2 quality. It was just a fantastic looking game. And that is the only game that looked any good for years. Years. Everything else had like screen bleeding and stuff like that. And Luminous was the other launch title, though, that we were all addicted to in my house. Like, you always find somebody in the living room with headphones on, just sitting and playing Luminous for hours on end. Be like, can I have that back, please? Metal Gear Acid.
Yeah. Was that a launch title? Or it was pretty soon
launch
thereafter?
Window, I'll give it.
Yeah.
We'll say within a few months.
Yeah. What a weird game.
Right? Puppets took over a plane.
Yeah, and like it was stealth, but with cards.
With cards, yep. And in stealth, like tactical turn-based stealth.
Yeah.
Real weird.
Yeah, I loved at the end of missions, you could, I think, cash out your points to get more cards.
Yes.
But the way that you did that, you actually bought packs of cards that you then had to like rip open.
Never had any idea what was inside.
Yeah, which is kind of amazing. As a once upon a time, a long time enthusiast of collectible card games, this definitely scratched an itch.
That worked for you.
Yeah.
You beat it. You get through the whole thing.
No.
I don't know
I thought
anyone who beat it.
No, it was just very bizarre. I enjoyed the time that I spent. I enjoyed the time that I spent with it, but missions felt very long.
Yep.
Because you had to take multiple turns for everyone to like walk down a hallway, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that was like, and it didn't. Well, coming off of like Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3,
yeah,
like, really didn't work.
Those were gorgeous games. So
yeah, fantastic.
Especially 3.
Untold Legends was another launch window game.
Yeah, that was some weird like hack and slashy games.
A little Diablo-ish.
Yeah.
A little like just pick up loot and try to get better armor, and I actually think it was a little underrated.
Yeah, I mean those games would be a good fit for that kind of that system, just real pick up and play.
Yeah.
Why have we never seen portable Diablo? That's a good question.
Because Untold Legends failed.
Yeah,
like,
I
that
guess
doesn't
so.
work.
Yeah.
Why bother? The big strange launch title for me though was, and maybe again this might have been a launch window, Ape Escape on the loose. For a game series that was well known for being a dual analog stick
dependent
game.
upon the dual analog.
Otherwise, it was just a boring platformer if you didn't have like this cool control scheme. What a weird game to port to your system with not only no analog sticks, plural, but an analog nub, which was so uncomfortable.
It was, and ridiculously so, because as my cult favorite handheld, the Neo Geo Pocket, showed us how to perfectly make an analog nub. I mean, it's the same exact thing, but it's worlds better.
Yeah.
Speaking of launch titles, I don't have the name because I can barely remember that this game exists. But wasn't there some weird shooter at launch where you fought zombies with blood?
Yeah.
So what the hell was that?
That was supposed to be a launch game.
That was their like killer app.
It was supposed to be a launch game. There were a few supposed to be launch games. It was called Infected.
Yes.
And I was so excited for this game, but all the screenshots that came out for it leading up to launch were just like
facing down the street.
Fake.
They were fake.
Oh,
really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They were like projected expectation kind of. And I was like, this looks amazing. And I kept seeing that. I was like, something's wrong here.
You see the light lamp hanging it down. Like they just took a picture on the street, dressed everybody up.
And it ended up being a good game, in my opinion. But it was not what people were expecting, and it was not what we were promised from that game. So a disappointment to most people. But I actually think Infected is one of my highlights. Why? Let's go here.
Your levels all off.
Check.
That looks okay.
Yeah, we're fine. So I think the mics are finicky. Like sometimes
Yeah,
they just work really well, and sometimes they don't. Some of them are real old. In fact, it was great, but another one that was supposed to be a launch title that ended up being delayed for, I want to say, almost a year was Death Jr.
Oh yeah, the platformer game.
Yeah, at Konami.
Yeah.
And it was not very good.
Yeah, that they made a couple of those too, and didn't they port one to the Wii? I think.
Maybe. I know there was one. They ported one to the DS. It was
Yeah.
like Science Fair of Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were okay, but I mean, they were nothing special.
Yeah, they definitely had that, like, was it Croc and Spyro the Dragon and Medieval, that kind of vibe of like B tier 3D platformers.
Yeah, definitely.
They had a Medieval on the PSP, didn't
Medieval
they?
Resurrection.
Yeah.
It was just basically just a remake of the first Medieval, with I think a few elements of the second one thrown in. But it wasn't until later. It wasn't until later that we got some bigger and better games. I don't know if you want to take over.
What eventually sold me on the system was Mega Man Powered Up.
This is my
Your contemplative.
This is my reminiscing face.
You should have everything go like sepia toned.
And have some dream
like,
bubble pop
yeah,
up.
yeah.
See what I'm thinking about.
And it's just naked dudes.
Just a hamster on a wheel.
Yeah. What was the bit in The Simpsons? So yeah, there's the donkey like under the tree, all covered in flies and like emaciated. Yeah, I remember when they announced Mega Man Powered Up for the PSP, and I was like, oh god damn it, because I as a huge Mega Man enthusiast, and it looked great, I was like, well, I guess I'm buying a PSP now.
Mm-hmm.
And that came out right kind of neck and neck with Mega Man Maverick Hunter X.
Yeah. They didn't give either game time to breathe.
No.
Maybe they knew the PSP was on a limited run.
Yeah. And I certainly wasn't disappointed. I mean, both of those were solid games. Powered Up, I feel like, has a reputation that's endured a bit more because it had that whole fan community, make your own levels. There was a bunch of free DLC they gave out for it.
You can make your own levels?
Oh yeah. They had a very robust level creator.
That's cool.
And a whole a whole online community where you could swap levels with people. You could also every boss that you beat with the Mega Buster, you unlocked that boss as a playable character, and you could go through the game playing as which is pretty great. I never finished it because I've never in my life been able to get past the floating platforms in Gutsman's level.
Yeah.
I only was able to do it in the original by cheesing it with this special weapon, which was not in Powered Up.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's my secret shame. But
Powered Up, just at its core, what was it? Because I know it was kind of a remake.
It was a very, very robust remake of the original Mega Man.
Okay.
It had a story mode. It had a whole bunch of spoken dialogue. It had 2 bosses added in, which I was never exactly clear on whether those were bosses that had been planned in the original and then just never implemented, or just added. So they had 2 new bosses to give it the standard Mega Man 8. The original Mega Man just had 6.
And then Maverick Hunter X was the Mega Man X remake.
Yeah. Which was not nearly... I mean, it was basically just the same game with, fairly decent 2.5D graphics and some well-animated cutscenes. But the neat part about Maverick X was once you beat the game, you unlocked the ability to play as Vile, which he's basically Mega Man Boba Fett.
Okay.
He looks like that fan-favorite villain. And you could play through the whole game as him. And unlike the Castlevanias where you unlock extra characters and it's the same thing, it's a totally different story.
Oh, wow.
There's all new animated cutscenes.
Cool.
There's a totally different. It ends during a totally different point. And Vile plays completely differently from X or Zero from the past games. His weapon loadout is very different, and it's a really cool mode to play through as him.
And you took Castlevania in passing.
Yeah.
And there was a Castlevania game.
There was. Significantly later. That was one of the real coups for the system. Well, I wanted to bring up the Castlevania in the context of the PSP's library kind of catches some flack sometimes because it was a lot of ports.
Yeah.
But it kind of...
A lot of ports.
Yeah, it was. I mean, a lot of ports. But it kind of reminds me of how the Game Boy Advance nowadays, I feel like, catches a lot of flack because they're like, oh, it's all Super Nintendo ports.
Yeah.
Which is true, but they're really good ports, and they
really
usually add, like, for the PSP, very few of those games were just straight ports. It was usually a lot of extra content, some new modes, some tweaked controls. So what we got with Castlevania was not only did we get it was a remake of Rondo of Blood, which is generally considered one of the top probably 2 or 3 Castlevania games, if not number 1. And it had never been released in the U.S. before.
Right, because initially it was the TurboGrafx CD game.
Yeah. There was a PC Engine CD, or Super CD game. And we got a upgraded port, which is nice. You know, it's good. But the best part is it came with unlockable, the original game, Rondo of Blood, and an unlockable version of Symphony of the Night.
Even better.
All of which had certain little tweaks, and they redubbed a bunch of the dialogue. They added in a few extra items and boss fights into Symphony. It was a really great little package.
So it's funny because there were a lot of games that didn't see the light of day on PSP. Like there was never a proper, I'm just throwing shit out there, like a proper Crash Bandicoot game. Like there was a kart racer.
Yeah.
Right? And there was
Who doesn't love those?
Everybody loves them. It's waiting for Uncarded.
Did you hear that somewhere else, or did you just make that up?
That's an old joke.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the joke about Naughty Dog is that they make 3 games and then they make a kart racer. Because it's Crash 1, 2, 3, Crash Team Racing. Then it's Jack 1, 2, 3, Jack X. And then so it was Uncharted 1, 2, 3, and we're like, when are we getting Uncarded? So that's been a joke for like 10 years now.
And then they sneak topless women into their games.
When was that?
That was Legendary Rings, I think.
Rings of Power.
Rings of Power.
Genesis.
Yes. Yeah. I think I brought that up like 4 times, and every time I do, you're like, really? Where?
Right, and then I remember it.
Yeah.
So we didn't get like some big name people. Oh, so then when I said we didn't get Jak and Daxter, we did get a Jak and Daxter. It was the port of the PS2 game, also not made by Naughty Dog, the Last Frontier, or the Lost Frontier, whatever the 4th Jak game was.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was like no one cared.
Nah.
We didn't get any proper Sly Cooper games. It was really weird in that respect.
We did get 2 God of War games, though.
But that's what I was gonna say. We got 2 God of War games, and they were actually my favorite God of War games.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, not that they had much competition. I don't really like God of War that much.
The second one was really good, though.
I'm not going to play God of War 4. I swear. I've been saying this for years. I'm done. But that's not the point. God of War games were good. Since we didn't get a Jak and Daxter proper game, we did get Daxter, a spin-off game.
Yeah.
And I got to say, when that came out, I was blown away by the graphics. Because it looked like... It wasn't made by Naughty Dog's A-Team. I don't even know if it was made by Naughty Dog. I don't think it was. It looked amazing. I was like, this is what the PSP should look like. You know, beautiful Jak and Daxter graphics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they had a few...
and Secret Agent Clank as well.
Yes.
That was like the Ratchet spin.
Yeah. The PSP was definitely a system where you could tell certain developers just got the architecture and certain ones just didn't.
Right.
Because there were certain developers that were really able to pull some horsepower. I mean, there were some gorgeous looking games. Those God of War games looked great.
Amazing.
And then there were others that just really... things were really chugging, just couldn't seem to get a handle on, or maybe they just didn't care. Maybe they just phoned it out.
There's a possibility, especially with a lot of the launch games.
Yeah.
You know, launch games have a reputation for just being there for people like me who are just going to buy everything at launch.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
It's what eventually helps the rest of us get discounts.
There you go. As far as original games, though, There's a lot of original games.
Oh yeah.
There was we got Patapon 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Patapon.
And Loco Roco.
Oh, that which should have just been a Flash game for eternity.
Don't you now own my copies of Loco Roco and Patapon? Because
maybe one of the Patapons was yours.
It was like right before we started hanging out a lot more. I sold all of my copies to the store, and then you went and bought them.
Every so often, I just pick a system and go, I need to go flesh out that catalog. And I just one day went in and I was like, oh, somebody sold their PSP collection, and I just bought it all because they were like $5 each.
Yeah.
And you were like, I just sold all mine. I just bought all of yours. I'm guessing. Yeah. Loco Roco's like I don't think that game was ever good.
Yeah, it
just reeked of a Flash game.
It had a really good reputation when it first came out. Everyone was like, "Oh, this is so cool! This is their first original." But yeah, it plays like something that you'd pick up on an iPad for like a couple bucks.
Things get
the music's good though.
It is.
It's very cute.
It should be in a Nintendo game or something. Games do get an unnaturally good reputation when there's nothing good surrounding them.
Yeah.
You know, like even when the PS4 launched, I think people were like, "Oh, Killzone Liberation," or Killzone Shadowfall. I was like, it's pretty good. I'm like, it's not. It's not. People thought it was. Even Knack. People thought Knack was good, and I was like, you are blinded.
Yeah.
Anyone who thinks Knack is a good game, turn this off, unsubscribe, get out of here.
Yeah.
Because
you don't want your kind.
No. Knack is garbage. Knack reeks of launch titleness. They're gonna make a second.
Of course they are.
That's the rumor. That's the rumor.
But Patapon is a pretty weird, interesting little game.
But for all intents and purposes, should have been a DS game.
Yeah.
That's a tapping the screen kind of game.
It's a rhythm-based strategy game. You know what? I really enjoyed Patapon for like the first 2/3 of every mission.
Yeah.
And then I'd like miss one beat and just get annihilated.
Yeah.
I don't know if they tweaked the balance in the future.
2 and 3 were much more well-rounded.
Okay.
Much better games, and even like most people will even tell you that if you get into Patapon now, which I'm not sure why you would, it's 2 and 3. You don't have to play 1. Start with 2.
Yeah, that's probably a good. Maybe I'll track down 2 at some point.
Behind the green screen. Might be yours.
Ooh, yeah, it probably is mine.
I know 3's not yours because it's still sealed.
Yeah, that wasn't mine. The
2 was weird because most of them were you'd buy a box copy in the store and you open it up and there's a code to download the game.
Yeah, I actually spent a long time looking for a copy of 2 with the disc in it.
Me too.
So yeah.
Now I think I have yours.
Yeah, yeah. So you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's. We had talked a little bit last week or the week before about collecting and how retro collecting is getting expensive.
Yeah.
The PSP is still a very affordable system to collect for.
Well, yes and no.
Really?
Well, I mean, and it depends what you call affordable.
Okay.
I mean, there was a time where Powered Up and Maverick Hunter X were like $7-8, and now they're like, I think if you want one complete in boxes, I always do. I mean, you're going to be spending $30 or $40 for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and I haven't
back.
checked prices on that in a year, and they may have gone up since then. They may have gone down since then.
The
prices don't go down anymore.
One game that I'd been kicking around getting for a while was Crimson Gem Saga, which is actually it's a sequel to Astonisha Stories.
Yeah.
They're both actually Korean PC RPGs. They're ports of games.
Interesting.
And they're both kind of not very good. Like you could tell from playing them. If any of you have ever played a lot of like Dojin or East Asian PC games, there's always not always. I shouldn't be. That's racist. But there's often a kind of unpolished feel to them. And a sort of they'll often come across as
you're welcome.
Yes, thank you. As they often feel like old 8 or 16-bit RPGs.
So they always feel like old 8 or 16-bit RPGs.
Yeah.
Was Legend of Heroes one of those series?
That is yeah, essentially the trilogy, the Legend of Heroes 1, 2, and 3.
Chinese or Korean?
No, those are Japanese,
Oh,
but they were, I believe, they were originally PC games that got ported, and yeah, they had that same kind of feel too. Just this sort of aimlessness, a serviceable like you never look at these games and are like, oh, they're ugly, but there's always a sort of like hollowness to how they feel.
Yeah.
The difference with Astonisha Stories or Astonishist or whatever the hell it's called and Crimson Gem Saga, they are gorgeous, like just really great. Astonisha Stories has great like 16-bit style character art. Yeah.
I'm watching the gameplay footage.
And Crimson Gem Saga has great, like, during the battles, your characters just animate so well. But they're both still not very good.
Okay. That's a shame.
Yeah, so I had bought Astonisha Stories for like $1 at some point, and I figured, you know what, when I dumped all those other PSP games that were garbage, I figured, like, well, I'll just hold on to this one. At least it's kind of pretty.
Yeah.
And I had rented Crimson Gem Saga and sent it back without finishing it. When I walked into a well and wound up in a mountain with enemies that were totally different. Yeah, it was just felt very unpolished. And I always thought, like, well, I don't know. If I find it cheap, I'll go back. That's one that's starting to get kind of expensive now.
Sure. So many games get expensive for no reason.
Well, it's because it's a lot of times it's B tier RPGs because they didn't sell very well. You know, they kind of disappeared from the marketplace, and then people get convinced that they're rare.
Yeah, and they are.
So
but there's a lot of rare stuff out there that you shouldn't want just because it's rare.
Yeah,
you should want rare good stuff.
Yeah.
I haven't distinguished between the two things yet. I just buy everything.
Someday.
Yeah. Remember Coded Arms? That was a first-person shooter.
Yes.
Real hyped up. I think again it was supposed to be a launch game. What did not make it for launch? It was by Konami, and it was a procedurally generated dungeons. It was supposed to all be in like VR worlds, I think.
Okay.
And this was a game that should not have been put out for the PSP. It was you used the D-pad, or maybe the analog stick, and the triangle, circle, square, X button as another analog stick, ultimately, and it felt so clunky. And they actually made a second one called Recoded, and there was supposed to be a PlayStation 3 game, Coded Arms game.
Huh.
Never made it, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they really pushed that. Like, this is going to be a series, and we're like, no, it's not. No, it's not, Konami. Stop. Keep bringing us Metal Gear Acid.
Oh,
we
Konami.
buy those for some reason.
Konami, remember back when you had ambition and creativity?
It didn't hit us with copyright strikes for showing gameplay footage of your games.
And didn't...
You're on the list, buddy.
Dump all of your properties into pornographic pachinko games. Yeah. What was that Castlevania one? I think they actually called it, like, erotic combat or something.
I would totally be into that.
Yeah, I
know. The weirder the better. Speaking of weird, The Third Birthday was a game I was super excited for because Parasite Eve is one of my favorite game series. I shouldn't say that. Parasite Eve 1 was amazing. Parasite Eve 2 is kind of garbage.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that... there are a lot of people that will say, oh, I love the Parasite Eve series, but their qualifier will be exactly what you just said.
Yeah. And then The Third Birthday, which is Parasite Eve 3 ultimately, straight up action game.
Yeah.
No real survival horror. Very light on the story. Interesting for what it was. You know, you want to throw a side story on the PSP, I'll check it out. But not a lot of substance there.
How did it play? Was it actually...
Quite okay.
All right.
Yeah. But you know what? It kind of had like the Devil May Cry 2 syndrome, where like you walked onto an enemy and you could just shoot it like without really trying. I didn't feel like there was a lot of strategy involved in the combat.
That game came out around the same time. I was never a huge Parasite Eve fan. Like, I thought the first one was okay. But that game came out around the same time as Metroid Other M.
Okay.
Both of which I feel like got hit by a lot of, like, essentially like, okay, Japan, we get it. You don't like women. Like,
damn.
And yeah,
that's true though, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of a turnoff to me. And admittedly, you know, I try not to let my political and my social beliefs totally dominate my form of, entertainment.
Yep.
Like I love the original Taken movie. I think that's great, even though it's clearly very paranoid and very anti-foreigner, but it's a real fun action movie.
Yeah.
I could not get past the sexism of Metroid Other M. Like, it was uncomfortable for me playing that game, and I think I've kind of grouped Third Birthday with Other M in that regard.
Okay.
But I keep thinking maybe I'll take a whack, because I haven't ever actually played Third Birthday, and maybe it wouldn't be as bad.
You're just not missing out on anything. That's
right.
As a fan, like I said, a fan of the series, I don't even recommend it. It's like, hey, it's worth a look, just to see what you missed out on, but you didn't miss out on much.
Yeah.
All right, we got to kind of like maybe speed things up here.
Yeah.
Move along.
When did we start? We had promised we'd keep these to half an hour.
I didn't even check. We're so far off.
Yeah.
What are there other games that you want to point out for this system? Because there are two other elements of the PSP I want to talk about.
Well, if we're gonna do I can save them for the end. If we're gonna do recommendations, I can recommend a couple PSP games. I think that works. So what did you?
UMD movies.
Oh yeah.
So that was a thing. Sony was convinced we all wanted to watch movies on our PSP.
Which is madness. Well, it's great because it's not even like, I could kind of see cinema, or not cinema necessarily, but like television or cinema designed for a handheld. Like, that's what it's made for. But these are theatrically released movies that are now being squished down. It's not even like you're watching it on your TV, which is already a pretty significant reduction in size. It's this little tiny screen that you're going to hold up in front of your face when you're like hiding under the covers so your mom and dad don't know you're still awake.
And I think that was sort of the target audience, right? People, they were convinced that it was like everyone, we all have a movie theater in our hands, because again, when the screen was new, when it was a new system, everyone was blown away by how big that screen was.
See, then they should have had more like Porky's and American Pie,
movies that you wanted to watch under the covers.
Yeah, yeah.
So
blue is the warmest color on UMD.
I was a little. So I don't know. I was a little into the idea at the time, and I don't know why. I rented a pretty nice place in Tennessee, and I had my own room and had a decent sized TV, and they had no reason to watch movies, but I was flying home for holidays and stuff, and so on the plane I definitely like put the headphones on and try to watch it, and amazingly enough, the glare on the screen was horrible, and the volume on the UMD movies was never quite loud enough to hear over the plane engine.
Yeah,
it was a great idea, I think, maybe, but ultimately a failure. There was a couple of cool things, and I don't know if they were unique to the PSP, but there was a My Chemical Romance kind of like video collection where there's like all these interviews and stuff like that. And I loved My Chemical Romance, and I think it came on two UMDs, and it was pretty cool. And I don't think I've actually seen it on DVD or Blu-ray. It may be, but it's the only place I've ever seen it, and I own that and I love it. And sometimes I throw it in. And then there was like certain things like the Silent Hill experience or whatever, which was not a game, just kind of like an interactive sort of movie comic book.
Yeah, and I mean, for a couple bucks, I think they did something like that with Metal Gear too. I think they put all of the Metal Gear. Who does the Metal Gear? The document.
They
might have ported it there, but I think they did have the Metal Gear comic on PSP too.
Yes, no, you're right. I forgot about the Metal Gear
is
comic.
Is it Ashley William? No, something. Whoever does the comic style art for Metal Gear, I think they did a comic of for PSP, and like that kind of stuff is pretty cool.
Yeah, and
like you said, the documentary and some ancillary material. I could see that stuff being released inexpensively on UMD, but that didn't seem to be the majority of what was being released.
Right. No, definitely not. Those were few and far between.
Yeah. Final
thing is emulation.
Yes.
It was definitely an emulation machine. You could hack that thing super easy.
Yep.
And you just then the next step was to buy the biggest memory card you possibly could for it. And did you use it for emulation?
I never actually did, and by the time I was getting into handheld emulation, I ended up tracking down a GP2X, which is great. And so
let me tell you that having every NES game ever made on your PSP was amazing. You know, and the Super Nintendo one, when I was super into it, was a little janky. It wasn't quite as good as I'm sure it is
Super
now.
Nintendo emulation always seems to be a bit of a sticking point for system. The GP2X, that's kind of where it sticks to. It's better, like you said, it's better now. You can get most stuff pretty spot on.
But the great thing, and really strange too, was that it played PlayStation 1 games natively.
Wow.
Natively. So it wasn't emulating. It was like, yep, we just know how to recognize this file format, and we're going to play it, and it started up, PlayStation screen, everything. It was like PlayStation perfection.
Wow.
So the fact that we didn't get more PlayStation 1 just straight ports, like there should have been like a $20 line of PlayStation 1 ports. Just, yeah, it's going to be
Yeah.
PlayStation 1 ports. It should have been like $20. Here you go. Here's Crash 1, 2, 3, $20. Boom. Why not?
Why not? It's that same. I know you often will say you're kind of a Sony fanboy, but there is one thing that Sony always irritates me about, and it's in that kind of. At least Sony of America is always very reluctant to bring certain kinds of things over, because the PSP. Being region free, I've explored a bit of the import scene there, and they had some great imports, and a lot of them were awesome packages of PlayStation 1 games. They had a Mega Man Legends compilation pack. They had a Suikoden pack. Both Breath of Fire games, and those are. I
didn't know this.
Yeah, and those are all games that were kind of rare and expensive, even at the time that the PSP was out. Yeah. And you just think to yourself, why not just bring those over at a budget price? And it's so cool.
Yeah. So that was weird. My favorite thing to emulate, though, all the Lucasfilm games, because it was just a scum emulator.
That's pretty great. Yeah, you can't really do that on the GP2. Well, you can, but it's janky.
Yeah, I mean, having Maniac Mansion, The Dig, Indiana Jones, Loom, Secret of Monkey Island, it's just like all in one place.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And there were even other Sierra games that would run through this whole thing. And
yeah, Scum runs a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was very cool. Very cool. It was my favorite part of having a PSP was having everything emulated. But I was always careful to keep up with the emulators, not the emulators, the firmware hacks.
Oh yeah.
Because I still wanted that duality. I wanted to be able to play the real stuff, and I think that's where maybe the software sales suffered a bit, because I think when people were hacking their system, they were like, I got all this free stuff I can download, and then they stopped buying retail stuff.
Yeah, lately I do think piracy has impacted handhelds quite a bit. Nintendo avoids it a little bit because the dual screen and the touch screen stuff is kind of hard to get around, but I do think the PSP suffered from piracy, especially towards the end. They had a lot of digital releases for a while, but just the physical releases dried up a long time ago.
Yeah.
But speaking of which, if we can introduce this. So the PSP, standard retail releases dried up ages ago, but Gaijin Works, run by our old friend Victor Ireland, formerly of Working Designs, has brought out 2 PSP games in the last couple of years. Physical, not retail release, but physical releases.
He didn't do Sweet Fuse, did he?
He did not. No, Sweet Fuse was still retail. You could theoretically go and get that at the store. Okay. Maybe.
So let's give it to us.
The first one was Class of Heroes 2, which was the sequel to the sort of mediocrely received Etrian Odyssey knockoff, which I still bought because I'm like, amazing, this is going to be the last physical PSP game.
Incorrect.
Incorrect, because they recently released Summon Night 5, which is a pretty obscure tactical RPG, and I paid for this, I contributed to their funding ages ago. I felt pretty confident that they would come through, but it finally rolled up a couple of weeks ago, and when I got it in the mail, I just looked at it and I was like, "This is amazing. This is a thing of beauty.
Whoa,
this
they
is the
shipped it in this box?
This is the box that it arrived at my house in.
Wow.
And just look at this. It's got all this gorgeous character. I mean, it's going to be a little hard to see,
Yeah, it
but
reflects it.
yeah, all right. Well, it's got all this gorgeous character art. It says the villain apparently is saying, "Open quickly, so we soon make battle with much sweatiness."
Awesome.
I almost wish they'd shipped it in a regular box though, because it's got the big shipping label on the front. But inside, it's not quite as exciting, but it comes with the soundtrack.
Nice.
And then under this little panel here, you've got the actual
Wow.
UMD, which, man, I have not played this game yet because I want to leave it in this gorgeous packaging for as long as possible.
I don't even think I would play it. Like it just what a collector's item.
I know, it's super cool. Yeah. I have long been a big Working Designs fan, and I know I feel like on the internet in recent years they've kind of caught some flack for some of the decisions that they might have made back in the day, or Victor Ireland was kind of the original argue with the fans kind of president of a company, but I think they were so good to gaming while they existed. They brought over all this super cool stuff that we never would have been able to get otherwise, and they did it with just so much style and personality.
Manuals were always full color and glossy.
Yeah, and like
pages
hardback, and the Lunar 2 came with the pendant that the girl wore. I mean, I'm sure that's why they eventually went out of business, because it's just a completely unsustainable business model. But
because you're marketing to a select group within a group.
Yeah, but it's so cool. And there was always that stuff about they changed dialogue or this or that. But if you look into it, it was always that they changed some like really innocuous piece of like some guy that's like, this is a fishing village, and they changed it to something like my butt hurts, or like and it just added more personality. You're not really impacting the quality of the story that way. But yeah.
So that wasn't your recommendation, though.
No.
What's
So
your
if we're wrapping up the episode, so my
probably should.
Yeah, we should. So my recommendation for actually I have two. I'm going to recommend two. Okay. I assumed we would talk about one or both of these during the show. So first off, I want to recommend 30 Second Hero. Mm-hmm. Which I think you can get on Steam and a couple other places now, digital download, but it was originally released at least in the US, on the PSP. It's such a cool little game, and almost not really an RPG, really more of like a puzzle game, a kind of adventure puzzle game, but just so much fun and so much personality, and really a kind of playful skewering and loving tribute to old school RPGs. And the other recommendation is a little more obscure. I feel like 30 Second Hero is, or it's not 30, Half Minute Hero.
That's what it is. I knew something sounded wrong with that.
Half Minute Hero.
Yeah.
They got the big 30 right on the cover, though, so that's what I was picturing. But a little bit more obscure is Deadhead Fred.
Oh, I totally remember Deadhead Fred.
Which I think I've recommended before on classic Gaming Without Parole, but It came out around the same time as Stubbs the Zombie, and it had a very similar visual style, and I think Stubbs being done by ex-Bungie employees just got more, and on a console got more attention, but and also a great game, but they're two very, very different games. Stubbs is more of like an action, almost strategy game. Deadhead Fred is really kind of like a horror noir take on Zelda, almost. You're in this, kind of wide open world that you gradually explore more of as you get different heads, and the heads function kind of like Zelda or Metroid's items. They let you open up new areas, and they give you new abilities, and they're all a pretty good mix too. The criticism of recent Zeldas is always like, oh, you get an item in the dungeon, and that's the only time you ever use it. But the heads in Deadhead Fred were very versatile. You could use most of them during combat too. Definitely not the polish of a Zelda or an Okami, but It had really great personality, and Fred, the titular Fred, was voiced by John C. McGinley of Scrubs, and what was he in the?
I don't even know who this guy is.
He was the jerk doctor on Scrubs.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah, John C. McGinley. He does a lot of voice work, actually, but he was just a perfect fit for Fred.
Nice.
So those are my recommendations for the week.
So strangely, I actually have 2 recommendations too.
Okay.
One will be real quick. It was remember the recommendation from last week, the Gekiko boy, the photograph.
Yes,
boy,
yes.
Or Gekisha boy. So that was TurboGrafx. So real strange. PC Engine game, right? I found out when doing my research for the review that's still yet to be published. By this time it will be.
Yeah.
That it was a simple 1000 game on PS1 in Japan.
Oh.
So they added like another playable character.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of addition. So that I already just imported that because I just
Nice.
found out about it. So since that's on PS1, you can play it natively on PSP. So
Nice.
this game, you can find it now in new place. Photograph Boy on PS1, emulate it on your PSP. But an actual PSP game, an actual UMD. Gurman, A Monstrous Adventure.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
One of my favorite PSP games that I magically forgot to talk about during this. And it was always compared to very much like a Zelda game.
Yeah.
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 More structured and like...
Yeah, a little more straightforward and
But cutesy and adorable and just overall fun.
I think that was also originally a PC game in Japan.
Okay.
I think.
Did not know that. But as far as I know, outside of that, can't find this game anywhere else.
Yeah.
Can't really play it anywhere else.
I think it's on Steam now, or...
So, okay, so see? No idea what's going on. But I do like the idea that some of these games are available to play on your Vita.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about some other time.
Yeah, exactly. As much as the PSP was kind of a stumble technologically, I feel like the Vita fixed a lot of those. The Vita is the Dreamcast of handhelds.
It is.
Yeah,
it really
we
is.
can talk about that another time.
And that'll be the title of the Vita video. The
Yeah.
Dreamcast of handhelds.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this up real quick.
Yes.
We got another one to do real soon.
Soon, yeah.
Yes, right away.
So, yeah, I'll close us out. So this has been Gaming Without Parole. Across from me is Bryan Paul.
And across from me, the ever illustrious Mike Zeller.
And we will see you next week.
Goodbye.